Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are cracking the code on one of the most successful and, well, fiercely structured literary genres out there, the romance novel.
Mm.
We're not just, reading them, we're looking at the meticulous blueprint. What makes these stories just so emotionally irresistible?
Yeah, and our source material today is pretty phenomenal, actually. It's basically the distilled wisdom from someone who's written 80, 80 successful romance novels
80, wow.
and taught the craft to hundreds of aspiring authors.
Wow.
So this isn't just about storytelling. It's really about highly effective emotional engineering.
It gives us a rare look under the hood, doesn't it?
It really does. Our mission here is to get some quick, thorough insight into, well, the structural rules, the character archetypes you need, and the specific publishing demands of this incredibly vibrant genre.
Revealing exactly why these stories hit so hard with their audience.
And how professional writers actually approach this specific market. It's quite something.
Okay, let's unpack this then. If you just boil it right down to the absolute fundamental formula, the core definition, what is a romance novel, before you even think about, say, the setting or the steam level?
Right. You absolutely have to start with the four essential girders, kind of holding up the whole structure. A romance novel is fundamentally the story of a man and a woman who, while they're solving some problem that threatens to keep them apart,
Sure.
they discover a once-in-a-lifetime love. And this discovery, this is crucial. It leads to a permanent commitment and, absolutely non-negotiably, a happy ending. The HEA, as they call it in the industry.
That guaranteed happy ending, that's the core truth you just have to accept, isn't it?
It is.
But doesn't that simple, kind of strict formula clash with, well, modern reality sometimes? I mean, the source mentions exceptions, like gay romance, or stories where the connection is deep, committed, but maybe not, a legal, traditional, permanent commitment.
That's a great point.
If the HEA is the absolute foundation, how did these exceptions even survive without, fundamentally threatening the genre's definition?
Yeah, that's where the spirit of the law, you could say, comes in. Even if the commitment isn't formalized with a ceremony, the reader has to feel it as absolute and permanent. It's an emotional HEA.
Ah, okay.
The essential function stays the same.
Yeah.
The reader needs that catharsis, that assurance that this couple has found the single best possible romantic combination for their whole future. The definition adapts to culture, sure, but that emotional promise, it doesn't waver.
Okay, so historically, for decades, really, there was basically just one giant brand dominating everything, right? Mills and Boon in the UK, Harlequin over here in North America.
That's right. For a long time, that was pretty much it.
Looking at the market today, that seems almost impossible. How did the genre splinter into all these super specific categories we see now?
Well, even under that single brand identity, the stories themselves were actually pretty divergent. You had contemporary settings, medical dramas playing out, historical epics, all under the same publisher banner.
Right.
But readers who were just devouring these books, they started demanding more variety. And authors, naturally, wanted to stretch their wings a bit.
I wanted to write different things.
Exactly. Longer stories, maybe spicier, more sensual ones, or even more confrontational plots that just didn't quite fit into that traditional short, sweet package.
So the market kind of fractured out of necessity, really. Both reader demand and artistic demand pushing it.
Precisely. Which meant the publishers had to step in and provide some clear signals.
Okay.
This demand led directly to creating entirely new brand names, radically different cover designs. And this wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a necessary business move.
To help readers find what they want.
Yeah, to help readers easily tell the difference between, say, a light Regency romp and a dark, modern, erotic thriller. This is really how the whole concept of the category romance solidified.
Ah.
Groupings of books sharing certain common elements, often published in these predetermined sets every month, made it super easy for a reader to grab exactly the flavor they were looking for.
And we have some really fascinating historical context here, showing how willing publishers were to experiment, even back then, looking at some of the older, now defunct categories. It's like digging through a market research graveyard, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They were constantly testing the boundaries. Like Silhouette had Shadows that featured paranormal plots, sometimes bordering on softcore horror. Pretty edgy for the time.
Oh, yeah.
Then Harlequin had Lucky in Love, where the main character had to suddenly strike it rich somehow. And Bantam's Love Swept was really instrumental, actually. An early step toward more openly erotic romance, kind of paving the way for a lot of what we see today. These defunct lines show that even in a genre seen as formulaic, risk-taking is pretty essential.
Okay, so let's look at the categories that did endure because their structural rules sound incredibly strict, starting with historical romance.
Right. These tend to be the longest of the romance novels.
Hmm.
Often you're looking at 80,000 words, maybe up to 120,000.
That's hefty.
It is. And that length allows for these incredibly deep, sprawling stories. You can weave in subplots about, say, social commentary, political intrigue, complex family sagas, as long as those elements always remain background to the main love story, of course.
And this is where that idea of elasticity for the modern reader comes in, which feels like a key insight into the commercial side of the craft. Authors have to intentionally bend historical facts to make the heroine relatable.
Absolutely. The heroine has to be accessible to today's audience. Think about it. If women in the Middle Ages typically married at 13, well, a heroine marrying that young would just clash violently with modern values.
Yeah, you'd lose the reader immediately.
Exactly. So romance heroines are generally older, more independent, and frankly, the heroes are significantly more enlightened than men of that historical period actually were.
Yeah.
And a crucial detail often overlooked. Authors must bend facts on personal hygiene.
Really?
Yes. Historical heroines have to be cleaner than their real-life counterparts. You just can't have your romantic lead smelling authentically medieval if you want the reader to stay engaged.
Okay, that makes sense.
And furthermore, any really grim stuff, torture, grisly warfare, violence, it's generally handled with extreme discretion. Happens off stage, usually, to keep the focus squarely on the emotional connection.
Okay. And within that big historical umbrella, you've got the very specific subgenre, Regency romance.
Yes, Regency is defined by being much shorter, often just 50,000 to 55,000 words. These are usually sweet rather than overtly sensual. The core focus is all on the intricate details of society, the rules, the manners, the drawing room humor.
Very Jane Austen-esque.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And because of that focus, the seamier side of life, poverty, crime, political darkness, it seldom appears. If a story is set during the Regency but involves darker stuff or more sensuality, it's typically longer and automatically gets reclassified as just a general historical set in that era, not a specific Regency category book.
Got it. Okay, moving to the contemporary world. Inspirational romance. Defined by a spiritual journey, right?
Correct. It revolves around a character's discovery of, or maybe return to, a relationship with a higher power. While it's often associated with Christianity, it's typically pretty non-denominational, focusing more on the faith journey itself.
Then the conflict?
The core conflict often centers on one main character being a solid believer, while the other is, struggling to find or regain their faith. This often requires the believer character to show a lot of grace and support, rather than judgment. That's key.
Okay. Now, if you want the most narrative freedom, the most complexity, you turn to the long contemporary. We're talking 70,000 to 85,000 words here. That word count lets you do things shorter categories just can't manage, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That higher word count is absolutely crucial for the kind of emotional engineering we talked about. It allows for more subplots, more intense secondary conflicts, like a strong mystery or suspense element running alongside the romance, and a larger supporting cast.
More room to breathe.
Exactly. And that latitude is necessary if you want to handle really complex main characters. For instance, maybe a hero dealing with a mental illness or a heroine overcoming some severe past trauma. You need that extra space to show the setbacks, the slow, believable progress towards healing.
Right, you can't just fix it in a chapter.
Precisely. It prevents the character from becoming just a simple plot device that's quickly resolved. Instead, you can build that deep reader empathy that's absolutely necessary for them to buy into the final HEA.
And then we get the genres that kind of intentionally broke the rules, like chick lit.
Yeah, this definitely emerged as a reaction against some of the more traditional romance tropes. Often told in the first person, features a younger heroine, typically mid-20s, maybe less established in her career, probably living with roommates.
And the rule breaking.
It's intentional. These heroines might smoke or binge drink sometimes, maybe sleep with more than one guy during the story, or swear quite a bit. These are all behaviors specifically not associated with more traditional, often more conservative, romance heroines. Made the genre feel fresh, a bit rebellious.
Which naturally led to the offshoot, momlit.
Right. Momlit keeps that kind of sassy attitude from chicklit, but features heroines who now have families. Often they have teenage or even older kids who might become part of the central conflict themselves.
So less self-destructive behavior.
Generally, yeah. Because the heroine now has dependents, she's less likely to indulge in the same way her chicklit counterpart might have. The conflict often shifts from, say, early career advancement and dating woes to balancing family, career, and finding a truly supportive partner.
Okay. And finally, the really fascinating, fantastic world of paranormal romance. This category has a unique structural demand, doesn't it? The author basically has to invent the laws of physics for their world.
They absolutely do. Whether you're dealing with vampires, time travel, aliens, werewolves, whatever, the author must establish absolute logic and consistency within that created world, like a core contract with the reader.
You can't just make things up as you go along.
No. Once you set a rule like, okay, my time machine only works on Tuesdays under a half moon, or my werewolves can only shift during a thunderstorm, that rule becomes fixed, like a law of nature in that story.
And if you break it,
You can't violate it later just because it's convenient for the plot, unless you provide an equally convincing logical explanation for the deviation. Readers are smart. They're trying to figure out the logic of your universe, and they're very quick to spot inconsistencies. They'll feel cheated if you break your own internal laws.
that insight about world-building consistency flows perfectly into character consistency, doesn't it? Let's move on to architecting the heroic couple, starting with the heroine. The sources make it crystal clear. Modern romance novels do not portray women as weak or helpless.
Not at all. They are competent, valuable, successful on their own. Finding the ideal man is, a bonus, a wonderful bonus, but not a necessity for her self-worth.
And this is where that emotional engineering really comes to the forefront. The heroine holds the ultimate transformative power in the relationship.
Absolutely. As the famous romance novelist Jane Ann Krentz put it, the woman always wins. She's the one who, through her own courage, intelligence, maybe gentleness, brings the most dangerous creature on earth, the human male, to his knees. She civilizes him, essentially, helps him embrace his softer, more vulnerable side.
But why is that taming part so essential for the reader? Why can't the hero just stay the dangerous alpha?
Because the HEA, the happy ending, mandates a relationship built on mutual respect and commitment, not just dominance. The reader needs to see that the hero truly values the heroine as a full partner. By having the heroine be the catalyst for his transformation, she secures a kind of relationship she actually needs and deserves. And that whole process validates the reader's own desire for a partner who can be, successful out in the world, but also vulnerable and respectful at home.
Makes sense. Now, to make the heroine believable, sympathetic, she needs flaws, right? But the right kind of flaws, not ones that just annoy the reader.
Yes, this is a really subtle but crucial distinction. Flaws that destroy sympathy are things like walking into an obviously signposted trap or believing a character the reader knows is lying.
Right. That just makes you frustrated with her.
Exactly, not worried for her. Sympathetic flaws usually stem from her difficulties, her past experiences, things that often come, at least partly, from outside herself.
Which leads to the idea that a sympathetic heroine needs a past.
Yes, though not necessarily like dark, hidden secrets, just experiences that have shaped how she reacts to things now. Was she raised in an orphanage, maybe giving her this intense need for stability?
Or the opposite.
Right. Or was she the much-pampered only girl in a family of 5 rowdy boys, meaning she approaches conflict resolution totally differently? These past experiences determine her emotional triggers, her feelings about family, safety, commitment. It makes her a distinct, understandable individual.
And even the historical heroine, who's battling all the extreme constraints of her era, fewer opportunities, tighter social rules, she still has to find a way to make her mark, doesn't she?
She can't just be passive. She has to find ways to exercise her competence. Maybe she ends up running her father's estate, or managing investments cleverly, or even just teaching the servants to read. Something.
So she has agency.
Yes, they're generally shown as mature for their age, looking beyond the short-term goal of just snagging a suitable husband.
Okay, let's turn to the hero. He's the pivot the story revolves around. And apparently today's hero is much more verbally communicative, tender, and vulnerable than the heroes of, say, decades past.
Oh, definitely. That evolution reflects the modern expectation for the HEA. The hero can now show flaws, he can ask for emotional support sometimes, but we still see that traditional split between the alpha and the beta types, though the most successful heroes often blend these traits.
Right, so the alpha hero, that's the classic mold, isn't it? Rich, powerful, maybe domineering tycoon, the kind you often see in, like, Harlequin presents.
That's the archetype, yes.
But if he's rich and domineering, how do authors keep him from sounding just completely misogynistic to a modern audience? How do you keep him desirable if his approach seems fundamentally transactional?
That is the absolute tightrope walk. The narrative focus is often on this intense, almost overwhelming desire, which, yes, can sometimes make the initial encounter seem transactional on the surface.
Okay.
But, and this is key, to maintain his desirability and actually earn that HEA, the author must reveal his internal struggle. Inside, he has to be wrestling with these powerful, unfamiliar emotions, showing that this particular heroine penetrates his armor in a way no one else ever has.
So the power dynamic shifts internally.
Exactly. The power, as we said, is ultimately the heroine's ability to tame that dominance into genuine respect.
Okay. Contrast that with the beta hero.
The beta hero is fundamentally the nurturer and protector. Think firefighters, law enforcement officers, maybe the hotel manager who's worried about the practical stuff.
Like the plumbing.
Yeah, the water pipes, the bed linens, or the pillars rotting, the budget.
Uh-huh.
This hero focuses on practical problem solving. He's just a different personality type from the alpha. It's kind of hard to imagine him kissing a woman unless she pretty much cooperates and maybe even asks him to.
Less forceful.
Much less.
And the ideal combination, the most attractive hero for many readers, is the one who shows both sides. The all to go-getter from 9 to 5, successful, ambitious, but who goes home and is a complete beta.
That's often seen as the sweet spot, yeah. The guy who can run the company but also plays with the kids, helps with homework, tucks them in with a bedtime story.
Satisfies both needs, I guess.
It really does. That desire for worldly success and the need for emotional availability. And the hero's history is absolutely paramount in developing this balance, whichever type he leans towards. His past experiences, even stuff from childhood, affect everything he does now.
Like commitment issues.
For sure. If a hero is really unwilling to commit, the narrative has to eventually reveal the deep-seated belief behind it. Maybe he thinks, consciously or not, that his mother drove his father to suicide, and that fear underpins his hesitation with the heroine.
And crucially, he has to confront that internal conflict. He can't just stay blocked.
Absolutely not. The writer has to engineer a moment, often it's when he thinks he's lost the heroine for good, that forces him to confront the real source of his feelings and change his attitude. If he doesn't change, he doesn't earn the HEA. Simple as that.
It's noted that historical heroes might be the most unreal of all characters because of this mandated evolution.
They kind of are, in a way. They often start out acting quite chauvinistic, reflecting the actual societal rules of their time, where men were expected to be the final authority. But they must undergo this profound transformation, usually through the heroine's influence.
So by the end?
By the end, they have to be willing to treat the lady he loves as a full partner, not just a possession or a pretty object. And this is a non-negotiable professional rule for writers. Any pre-existing complications, like mistresses, have to be fully and completely resolved. The heroine must be the final, only woman in his life. You can't gloss over adultery if you want that HEA to feel satisfying and earned.
Okay, now we get to the real engine of the story. Conflict. Since the reader already knows the hero and heroine will end up together, just watching them fall in love isn't enough, is it?
No, that'd be kind of boring, frankly. Simply watching two people date and slowly explore their growing attraction isn't exciting because you know the destination.
You need obstacles.
You need conflict. Conflict is the essential tension. It's the difficulty between the characters that threatens to keep them from that guaranteed happy ending. It creates the page-turning difficulty, makes you wonder how they'll get there.
And the source material highlights two essential types of conflict, like structural girders holding the whole thing up.
That's a good way to put it.
First, the short-term problem, or external conflict. This sounds tangible, plot-driven.
Exactly. This is the immediate situation that brings the couple together in the first place and, crucially, forces them to stay in contact long enough to actually get to know each other, despite maybe not wanting to.
Okay, like what?
Oh, the classic examples.
Yeah.
They're assigned to work on a project together even though they can't stand each other.
Yeah.
They're a divorced couple forced to sit together at their kid's wedding. Or he's just bought her beloved family's ancestral estate, and she flat out refuses to leave.
Right, things that force proximity.
And if the short-term problem isn't something they literally share, then their individual troubles will be very closely related. Like, he desperately needs a house right now, and she's a real estate agent on the verge of losing her job who needs this specific sale to survive.
So their goals are intertwined, even if conflictual.
Yes. This external problem usually provides the easiest path for building the plot's rising action.
Okay, then there's the much deeper, more psychological one. The long-term problem, or internal conflict. This is about their core personalities or pasts making commitment seem impossible.
That's right. This is the engine of the emotional blockage, as you put it earlier.
Yeah.
It's a character flaw, maybe,
Yeah.
or a reaction to a past trauma, like a crippling lack of trust or a deep fear of loss, or even a profound incompatibility based on their core values.
Like the casino example.
Exactly. She might hate casinos with a passion because her father was a compulsive gambler who ruined the family and the hero. He makes his living running a massive, glittering casino complex. That kind of deep-seated opposition makes them feel fundamentally wrong for each other on the surface, no matter how strong the physical attraction is.
And the power of this long-term problem is that it affects everything the character does, right? Even if the reader or even the character themselves doesn't realize the root cause until much later in the story.
That is the absolute key to the suspense of character development. It colors how the hero acts towards the heroine, driving the conflict forward, especially if his commitment phobia, say, is rooted in his parents' tragic marriage that he hasn't fully processed.
So the reader feels the friction.
Yes. The reader experiences the conflict as frustration, wondering why he's acting this way until the final reveal. That makes the eventual resolution, when he finally understands and overcomes it, deeply satisfying.
Okay, so given all these reasons not to be together, internal blocks, external problems, the characters need a really compelling reason to stick around at all. Otherwise, any sane person would just walk away, right?
Absolutely. And this reason is what the source material calls the force.
The Force, like Star Wars.
Huh. Not quite. It's the narrative glue, let's say. Often, the short-term problem functions as the force. It requires the hero and heroine to stay in the same physical or emotional space long enough. A shared crisis they have to manage, a shared workspace. Maybe they're stuck sharing a car on a long road trip. Long enough for them to realize that despite all their differences in internal blocks, they are actually a perfect fit for each other.
The proximity forces the connectment.
It forces the opportunity for connection, yes.
And the payoff for resolving all this tension, all this conflict,
Uh,
has to lead to a believable, once-in-a-lifetime love.
Yes, it cannot feel casual or temporary.
Yeah.
It's not enough for them simply to fall in love. The readers have to be utterly convinced that this particular couple represents the best possible romantic combination for each other.
How do you show that?
They need to find something specific in each other. A sense of security, maybe a unique challenge, a vulnerability they only show to that person, something they could never find anywhere else. That intense emotional need has to be articulated, either through their actions or their internal thoughts.
Which brings us back to the hero's perspective. The source actually quotes one hero articulating this intense need. "I want to feel that a woman's world would not be complete without me, that I gave her something that no one else in the world could."
That really captures the essence of the HEA, doesn't it? It's about irreplaceable emotional value. Physical attraction is essential, of course, for the initial spark. But if the characters can only think about each other's great bodies, well, they probably aren't candidates for lasting love in this genre.
Needs more depth.
It has to be a meeting of minds and souls, ultimately, securing that emotional guarantee the reader paid for when they picked up the book.
Okay, let's move into the actual nuts and bolts of the craft. Professional writers have to avoid some common amateur mistakes, starting with starting the story right.
Oh, definitely. Beginning writers often start way too soon, dumping pages and pages of backstory and history before the reader has any reason to care about the characters.
For the opposite.
Or they start too late, plunging the reader straight into some complex action scene or argument that just leaves them confused about who's who and what's going on.
So the goal for page one is very specific and active. Show the main character under some kind of pressure, facing a challenge, a big change, or a threat that's going to significantly alter the rest of her life.
Right. You should ideally start with one of the two main characters, usually the heroine, facing that initial challenge head on. The example given is great. A heroine is just trying to take a relaxing bath, and boom, she finds an abandoned infant on her doorstep.
That immediately changes everything.
Instantly. It alters her life, creates immediate pressure, sets the stakes high right from the beginning.
And there are some strict don'ts for starting points, too, which really highlight the need for active engagement from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. Do not begin with a flashback that's inherently passive, looking backward. Do not start with a dream sequence that's usually irrelevant to the plot's current reality and often feels like cheating. And please, do not start with a character waking up.
Why not waking up? Seems common.
It's almost always a variation on starting too soon. Nothing important is usually happening yet. The readers need to be introduced to the hero and heroine as people before they're thrown into some confusing argument or a complicated action scene they lack the context to understand.
Okay. And the first meeting between the hero and heroine is absolutely critical. It sets the stage for everything that follows and must be shown, not just summarized. Which brings us right into that fundamental distinction, story showing versus storytelling.
Yes. Storytelling or telling is when the author just gives you a summary. If they write, Sydney had a rotten day and the last straw was when her client made a pass, well, that gives you the author's conclusion.
But you might not agree.
Exactly. Readers might be skeptical. What's the author's definition of rotten?
Yeah.
What exactly constituted pass? You feel distanced, told about it, rather than experiencing it.
Whereas story showing involves the reader directly by providing the sensory details, the specifics.
Precisely. So instead, the author writes, the client, the one with the thinning hair, spent 20 minutes nitpicking the spreadsheet Sydney had finalized at 2 a.m.
Oh.
And then, as she leaned over to gather her notes, he laid his hand flat on her tush. Now the author has given the readers the evidence, they can form their own conclusion that yes, Sydney definitely had a rotten day.
And you feel sympathy because you experienced it with her.
Exactly. It involves them directly, makes the character immediately sympathetic because they shared that unpleasant little moment.
Okay. When it comes to point of view, POV, the genre standard seems to be the third-person selective multiple POV.
That's the most widely used, yeah. It includes the thoughts of more than one main character, which is often crucial for the reader to understand the hero's internal transformation, for example. But critically, it's only one viewpoint at a time, and these shifts must be clearly separated by a scene break. No head hopping within a scene.
And first person.
First person is used a lot, especially in chick lit. But its success depends almost entirely on the narrator having a genuinely engaging personality, funny, breezy, sympathetic. If the narrator comes across as too self-conscious or constantly complaining, the reader will tune out fast.
The big technical danger here is the wandering POV.
Yes. That's when the author fails to clearly identify whose viewpoint character we're in, or worse, hops from head to head within the same scene. That inconsistency is incredibly jarring. It just instantly destroys the story's magic, that connection with the character.
So clarity is key.
Absolutely. And in multiple POV, the most important character, usually the heroine, should always dominate the scene count. She anchors the emotional journey for the reader.
Okay, all this craft, all this build-up, it leads towards the black moment, the structural climax of the conflict.
Yes, this is that critical point, usually landing somewhere near the end of the next to last chapter, where it seems absolutely impossible that the long-term problem can ever be solved. All appears lost.
Hope vanishes.
Completely. One character often turns to physically walk away. It genuinely looks like there will be no happy ending. And crucially, it must arise naturally from the plot, the character's internal conflicts that have been building. It can't be some cheap, manufactured misunderstanding that could be cleared up with a 5-minute conversation.
And the purpose of this moment isn't just drama, it's catharsis, right?
Exactly. It provides the space for the characters and, by extension, the readers to fully experience the pain of their potential loss. That pain is often what forces the necessary change or realization. Placing it near the end allows for about 20 pages or so for the dramatic resolution.
Where they pull it back from the brink.
Right. Where the couple finally confronts their fundamental incompatibility, maybe articulates their irreplaceable need for one another, and somehow, finally, secures their lifetime commitment against the odds.
We also need to touch on the professional use of foreshadowing and pacing. Foreshadowing isn't just about dropping hints, is it? It sounds like an active technique of misdirection.
It really is. Good foreshadowing involves giving readers all the information they technically need to solve the story's secrets or anticipate plot twists, but masking it subtly so they won't figure it out right away.
How do you mask it?
The professional technique is often to ensure that each clue has at least 2 plausible outcomes. One is the real one, the other is the red herring. The author wants the reader to chase for a while.
Right.
This keeps the reader guessing, actively engaged, and invested in figuring things out.
The source gives a great, really specific example of this, making an event that could seem contrived feel inevitable.
Yeah, the tripping example. If you, as the author, want the heroine to plausibly trip over a carpet seam and fall right into the hero's lap at a crucial moment later in the story, well, you can't just have that happen out of the blue.
Feels like a cheap plot device, then.
Exactly. So what you do is plant the seeds maybe 100 pages earlier. The heroine briefly notes, perhaps in passing, that the hero's antique chair seems to be defying gravity on an uneven floor, and that the carpet nearby is dangerously threadbare.
Ah, setting it up subtly.
Right. So when the trip finally does happen much later, it feels like the natural, almost inevitable result of those earlier, seemingly minor observations, not just authorial convenience. And pacing, then, is the crucial technique of varying the speed of the narrative.
Not just all action or all reflection.
No, you need that rhythm, following active, high-stakes scenes with slower, more reflective ones where characters process what happened. But the key to good pacing is always keeping at least one problem, one threat, or one unanswered question hanging over the characters until those final pages right before the resolution. Keep the tension alive.
Okay, let's shift to the realities of the market and professional practice. Starting with research. Knowing what you write. The advice seems simple. You can't always write what you know, so you have to know what you write.
That sums it up perfectly. Credibility and accuracy are vital. Not just for believability, but sometimes it has real-world applications. The source notes this profound example. An author did thorough research on carbon monoxide poisoning for a plot point.
Yeah.
And later, a reader recognized the symptoms in her own home because of the book and got her family out safely. It literally saved their lives.
Wow. That really elevates research beyond just, background dressing.
It really does. And you need both broad, general research and sometimes highly specialized information.
Okay, like what?
Well, general research might involve visiting a specific city you're setting the book in, or maybe a historical battlefield. But specialized research demands digging into primary sources, or at least very reliable secondary ones. For legal issues, you absolutely must know the specific marriage requirements by state or country. Which states permit marriage on just 2 hours' notice, for example?
Yeah.
That could be a plot point.
Details matter.
Hugely. For medical scenarios, you can't just wing it. You need professional sources, nursing textbooks, reliable sites like WebMD, maybe even medical case studies for accurate symptom descriptions and treatment protocols. And be specific about location details. Don't rely only on your vacation photos. Know that London fire hydrants are mostly below ground. If your American hero tries to hook up to an above-ground one in London,
The savvy reader will call you out.
instantly, the error pulls them right out of the story.
And we mentioned this earlier, but it's worth reiterating. The professional practice of historical fact-bending.
Yes, it's often a commercial necessity in historical romance. Wise authors consciously bend certain facts, particularly around issues like the typical age of marriage, women's legal rights, and especially, as we discussed, personal hygiene to fit modern sensibilities.
Because the unvarnished reality would be too alienating?
Exactly. If the historical reality of the era would cause the character's behavior or circumstances to clash violently with contemporary values, you generally have to soften that reality. Historical heroes and heroines simply must be older, cleaner, and often more enlightened than their real-life counterparts to maintain reader empathy and allow for that HEA.
And this commitment to logic and consistency extends even into the invented worlds of paranormal settings, right? You have to follow your own rules.
Absolutely. In fact, the more unusual the world you're creating, time travel, aliens with unique biology, vampires with specific needs, werewolves with shifting triggers, the more necessary it is to have logical, consistent explanations for how everything works.
You need an internal logic.
You do. You should pay attention to existing legends if you're using them. But ultimately, once you set up a rule for your world, it becomes a law of physics within that story, and you cannot break it without a very good, internally consistent reason. If you define precisely how your vampire needs blood, or what triggers the werewolf shift, that rule has to govern the entire story structure. Reader's notice.
Okay, next up, the art of dialogue. It's called the story's flesh and blood. It has to advance the plot or develop character, ideally both at once. And for realism, dialogue needs to reflect real-world gender differences in communication styles. The source gets very specific about this.
It does. In short, the writer needs to acknowledge that, generally speaking, men and women often communicate using slightly different rules and for different purposes. Men stereotypically perhaps, but often accurately in fiction for contrast, tend to talk more about things, jobs, hobbies, sports, events.
Facts and actions.
Right. They tend to use shorter, more direct sentences, and often resist explaining their feelings unless they're under extreme stress, and even then, they might show anger more readily than vulnerability. They tend to be direct, maybe solution-oriented, rather than seeking approval through conversation.
And women, conversely.
Again, generally speaking, for fictional contrast, women often talk more about feelings, relationships, ask more questions, and tend to sympathize or share similar experiences rather than jumping straight to giving direct advice.
Wait, the source really details that a woman asking, "Would you like to go out for dinner?" should often be interpreted as a direct request, meaning, "I don't want to cook tonight."
Huh. Yes, that's an incredibly specific and probably quite relatable for many insight into communication dynamics in committed relationships.
Hmm.
Women often phrase a preference or a request as a question, partly to maintain rapport,
Ah,
and they also tend to use self-deprecating humor more often than outright bragging, which is a key way their dialogue can build sympathy with the reader. Recognizing these nuances, even if they are generalizations, is essential for crafting believable, engaging conversations between the leads.
okay. Regarding love scenes and sexual tension, how is a love scene actually defined in this context? It's not just about sex, is it?
Not at all. A love scene is defined much more broadly as any physical expression of affection between the couple. It could be a kiss, a significant touch, even just a foot massage. But the key is it must be integral to the plot or character development. It can't just be thrown in as filler.
And you can build powerful sexual tension without being explicit.
Absolutely. You can use societal rules and constraints, especially in historicals, to amp up the tension. Think about a gloved finger just barely touching a heroine's cheek during a forbidden private moment in a very strict society. The tension comes from the restraint, the risk, the circumstances, not necessarily from graphic detail.
And what about violence and romance? It seems like there are some very clear lines here, especially regarding the hero and heroine's dynamic.
Yes, this is handled with extreme care in modern romance. Detailed descriptions of torture or graphic violence are generally considered inappropriate for the genre's core readership. If violence occurs, it should ideally happen offstage. Or, if the heroine is involved, she should be portrayed as resourceful, not just a helpless victim.
And between the main couple.
But the most critical modern boundary is violence between the hero and heroine themselves, specifically things like rape or physical coercion by the hero. Modern readers find it incredibly difficult, bordering on impossible, to believe a heroine could find lasting happiness and a true HEA with a man who has previously abused her in that way.
Hmm.
Regardless of historical accuracy arguments or using it as a plot device, that kind of action is just toxic to the genre's fundamental promise of a safe and affirming love. Writers tread very carefully there now.
Okay. Finally, let's talk about the practicalities. The publishing path. If you're an aspiring author looking to break into this highly specialized market, what are the professional realities? Do you need an agent?
It depends. For the bigger books, the single title releases or mainstream novels that get wider distribution,
Hmm.
you absolutely require an agent. Those large publishers rarely, if ever, look at unsolicited manuscripts anymore.
But for category romance.
However, the category romance publishers, like Harlequin or its various imprints, are somewhat unique in the industry today. They are among the very few publishers that still actively read and acquire unagented and unsolicited submissions. This makes them a potentially viable entry point for new authors trying to break in.
Okay, so if you're submitting, say, directly to a category line, what does a successful submission package look like? It needs 3 specific things, right?
Yes. First, you need a compelling query letter that hooks the editor. Second, you need strong sample chapters, usually the first 3 or so, to showcase your writing style and voice. And third, you need the synopsis.
And the synopsis is critical because
Because it must summarize the entire story, including the ending. You never leave the ending a mystery for the editor. This feels counterintuitive if you're used to other kinds of fiction writing, but romance editors need that guarantee up front that you understand the genre requirements, that you can successfully resolve all the conflicts, and most importantly, that you can deliver that satisfying required HEA.
they need to know you can stick the landing.
Precisely.
And what if you get the chance to actually meet an editor, maybe at a writer's conference? Any tips there?
Yeah, first off, remember, they are looking for good, saleable books. They're not scary, man-eating tigers, as the source puts it. Be professional, be polite, and be prepared.
Prepare how?
Have your pitch down pat. It's also really wise to have a fallback proposal ready in your mind, just in case they aren't keen on your first idea. And most importantly, always have your completed manuscript polished and ready to mail immediately if they request it after the conference. But, and this is a common newbie mistake, do not try to hand them your manuscript at the conference itself. They're there to network and meet authors, not to lug heavy boxes of paper back to their hotel room. Just get their interest, follow it professionally, and send the manuscript to Vast. Hashtag tag outro. So if we synthesize all these takeaways,
Yeah.
we've really seen that the romance novel is this fascinating genre defined by a very explicit structure.
Yeah.
That two-part conflict, internal and external, the absolute necessity of commitment, and that guaranteed happy ending.
Yeah.
And yet within that tight framework, the ultimate power is often ceded to the heroine.
Hmm.
She's the one who usually with courage and intelligence manages to transform that most dangerous creature on Earth, the hero, into the respectful, vulnerable partner she actually needs for that HEA to work.
And the craft itself demands this incredible professional adherence to strict rules. Rules of logic, consistency, market demand, requiring writers to sometimes invent the physics for werewolves or bend history just to make sure a heroine's hygiene is acceptable to a modern reader.
It's true. The entire structure is this masterful balance of, commerce and heart. And the most successful piece of writing advice we found in all this was actually quite simple. Write the story you want to write.
Okay. But considering the incredibly intricate framework that we've just spent all this time dissecting, the strict word counts for categories, the mandated happy ending, the defined character evolution arcs, even specific dialogue rules, and that necessary misdirection involved in good foreshadowing, that sounds like a massive constraint on pure creativity, doesn't it?
It could seem that way.
So here's where it gets really interesting, I think. How does that pure joy of writing a story you genuinely love survive the incredibly hard work of conforming to the market's very specific and sometimes seemingly contradictory rules? Is the formula ultimately the cage that restricts? Or is it actually the supportive scaffold that allows the story to reach its maximum emotional potential within its specific genre?
That's definitely a deep dive for today, something for you, the listener, to perhaps ponder next time you pick up a category romance.